Hello, this is Dr. D, and today we are going to talk about the pituitary gland, specifically the anterior pituitary gland. Okay, the pituitary gland is a very small endocrine gland, pea-sized, located at the base of the brain. You should have come across sella turcica of the sphenoid bone in 201. Think about that depression right here. And look, this pea-sized, pituitary gland lies in this depression. All right. The anterior part is called the anterior lobe. Better still, we call it adenohypophysis. The posterior part is called neurohypophysis. Today, we'll talk about the anterior lobe or the adenohypophysis. All right. The anterior lobe secretes a whole bunch of hormones. We'll talk about it in the coming slides. But what is important is that there are, of course, 5 different types of cells secreting each type of hormone. All right. So here there is 6 hormones that are secreted by the anterior lobe. All right. Now here is the most interesting and important part. What is it? Well, the production of the hormones by the anterior pituitary is controlled by the who? Hypothalamus. All right. And the hypothalamus secretes these releasing hormones or inhibitory hormones that will either stimulate the anterior pituitary or will inhibit the anterior pituitary. So we'll see this in the coming slides. All right. So here, the anterior lobe, the neurons of the hypothalamus secrete the hormone, and here they are the releasing hormones. The releasing hormones, like I said, what do? They will stimulate. All right, they will stimulate the production of the hormones. But there are the inhibitory hormones that will inhibit or reduce the secretion of the anterior pituitary hormones. You'll see this more in detail in the upcoming slides. All right, so here is what I'm talking about. Now, this is a very important slide. You absolutely have to know this. Now, the anterior pituitary produces the growth hormone, all right? And remember, keep this in mind when you're studying for lecture, you're also studying for lab. All right, so the growth hormone, there are 2 hormones secreted by the who? Hypothalamus. The growth hormone releasing hormone will stimulate the anterior pituitary to produce the growth hormone. The somatostatin, or also called the growth hormone inhibiting hormone, will inhibit the growth hormone. All right. Prolactin is also controlled by 2 hormones produced by the hypothalamus. The prolactin releasing factor will stimulate prolactin production by the anterior pituitary, whereas prolactin release inhibiting hormone will inhibit the anterior pituitary from releasing prolactin. Got it? We talked about this in the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is stimulated by the TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, by the anterior pituitary, which in turn is controlled by the thyrotropin releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus. Adrenal cortex is stimulated by the adrenocorticotropic hormone produced by the anterior pituitary. Okay. But this is in turn controlled by the CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone. One thing important, no acronym is allowed. You have to know the full form and the correct spelling. The ovary or the testes, depending upon the gender of the being, is controlled by 2 hormones, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. This in turn is stimulated by the GnRH produced by the hypothalamus. All right, we'll see each one. Each hormone is taken up by the upcoming slides. So here goes. This is just showing the negative feedback, and we'll talk about it more in detail. And as I said, here's the first hormone, or the growth hormone. Now, the growth hormone is a protein hormone, and what does it do? It stimulates the growth. So, increases protein synthesis, a decreased rate of carbohydrate used by the cells. That's why when growth hormone is there, what do? You are going to use less of carbohydrate. You are going to burn fat more. All right, and that's why you lose weight. And so suddenly you'll see these kids, their jump their height, in puberty. That's the reason. Stimulate the growth of bone tissues, cartilage. So basically, growth of bones, muscles, tissues is growth hormone. All right. Now here is what you will be needing for both the lab and lecture. Growth hormone is produced by who? We said anterior pituitary. All right. Growth hormone is stimulated by who? By the GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone produced by the who? Hypothalamus. All right. But if growth hormone is inhibited by somatostatin or growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So here what we are trying to say is that if there is a protein deficiency, then a growth hormone releasing hormone is produced, which will stimulate growth hormone and will bulk up bone, muscles, etc. All right. If the blood glucose and protein is high, then what happens? Somatostatin is released, which is going to inhibit growth hormone, and therefore what happens is will not lead to the bulking up of the bone and muscles. Do you understand? Anyway, keep one thing in mind, that the growth hormone itself will have, if there's high growth hormone, it will have a what? Negative feedback. Don't forget, all hormones are under negative feedback. All right, so it is going to inhibit the hypothalamus from producing excess GnRH and somatostatin. Clear? Now, what is the problem if you have a hypo production and a hyperproduction? Hypoproduction will lead to dwarfism, right? Hyperproduction of growth hormone in young ones, all right, not in adults, will definitely result in what? Gigantism. Okay, but this will be in when they are children, in a child, not in an adult. But in an adult, if there is high amount of growth hormone, then you end up with what's called acromegaly. The word acro means not good, mega means big. So here is the overproduction. We talked about gigantism. What is acromegaly? Acromegaly will be when there is excessive growth of the extremities. So long nose, jaws, very big tongue, and especially digits, hand and feet. The digits will be large, huge, massive, and towards the end, you will end up with a hooked nose. So a good way to remember, if you remember how you depict a witch. You depict a witch with a long nose. So where did that long nose come from? Acromegaly. Now, so remember, in an adult, what happens is that the growth plate is closed. So no longer can the long bones increase. However, the extremities, that means the digits, these are the facial bones, they can increase in length. All right, and that's where the growth hormones act in the extremities. All right, moving on. Moving on is prolactin. Now, prolactin immediately has the growth of the function is milk production and development of mammary glands within the breast tissues. So, good question to ask is, what's it doing in males? Of course, in males is needed for what? Normal sperm production. All right. Also, sometimes also it's needed for the release of the sperms. Now here, prolactin is under the influence of two hormones produced by the who? Hypothalamus. the prolactin releasing factor will stimulate prolactin production by the anterior pituitary, and prolactin release inhibiting hormone is going to inhibit. You have to know this for your lab. Now here, if the levels are too low, then obviously she'll not be able to produce milk. All right. And if it is too high in a female, it will lead to galactorrhea. That means it will be excessive milk production. All right. But in disruption in prolactin balance, it has an effect on menstrual cycle. Keep this in mind. If you have very high prolactin production, then the female is not going to have a normal, regular menstrual cycle. Okay. So here, now one thing, of course, this is obvious. The prolactin stimulates production, but its action is blocked until after childbirth. Okay, and we'll talk about this in Unit 4. How during childbirth or after childbirth, prolactin is stimulated. Okay. Thyroid stimulating hormone, this is again a repeat. Thyroid gland is stimulated by the TSH produced by the anterior pituitary, which in turn is stimulated by the TRH, thyrotropin releasing hormone. Don't forget, thyroid produces what? T3, T4 and calcitonin, right? So if there is very high T3, T4, what do you think will happen? Again, negative feedback loop. So here you are going to inhibit TSH and inhibit TRH, right? That's the only way the body can maintain what? Homeostasis. All right. So here, if there's extreme cold, that it increases TRH and TSH. Why? Because remember, T3, T4 is responsible for what? Increasing BMR, basal metabolic rate. All right. Adrenocorticotropin hormone. Now, the adrenal glands are directly stimulated by the adrenocorticotropic hormone produced by the anterior pituitary, and which is stimulated by the CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, by the hypothalamus. We'll talk about this more in detail later on when we'll talk about the adrenal glands. And the last two hormones, the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, both of them go hand in hand, by the way, and they are stimulated by the GnRH produced by the hypothalamus. All right. Both of them will have an effect on the ovary and the testes. Let's take one thing at one time. All right. LH stimulates sex hormones. What are the sex hormones? In females is the estrogen, and in testes is the testosterone, right? The androgens. In females, also the LH is essential for the release. You have to have an LH surge, which is needed for the release of the egg, all right, from the ovary. Now, this deficiency can manifest in both males and females. Why? Because there will be delayed puberty. Hypogonadism, that means small size gonads, and at any age, or reproductive abnormalities can be dramatic or subtle. Follicle stimulating hormone is required for the growth and maturation of the follicles. So here, that means release of the eggs and production of the what? Production of the sperm cells. So if its FSH is low, what does that mean? If FSH is low, remember that means that here you have an ovarian failure. Something is not right. Either, so this loss of ovarian functions, right? If you have a high FSH, something is not right. Either you're starting with menopause or premenopause, polycystic ovary syndrome, or you have a premature ovarian failure, that is before at the age of 40. If you have low levels, what does it mean? You're not making enough eggs, all right? Or your pituitary gland is not working correctly, or you have a problem with the hypothalamus. In males, if you have high FSH, then either it's because of chemotherapy or Klinefelter syndrome. Remember, either case, it is not good to have either high or low. So with this, we come to the end of our presentation. I thank you for your time and attention. If there are questions or concerns, please reach out to me. Have a good day.